Welcome back, everybody. Monday afternoon here. John Aravosis in Chicago instead of Washington, D.C. for 3 more weeks and then back to D.C. Welcome, everybody. Let folks know where you are from, and I'm going to start the TikTokers. Boom. Ooh. Let me just check the TikTokers here. Who's the first TikToker? Burp. Burp, 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 burp. Manda Bear, you made it first. There you go. My faith in you has been restored on TikTok. All right, folks. You know how this works. Everybody introduce yourselves. Say where you're from, if you would. My little dry lip problem is finally getting better. Ouch. Hey, everybody. I had my day off yesterday for Greek Easter, which was very nice. We ate much food. Oh, glammy. Exactly. It's my glammy. Now it's my lip like burned or something. I don't know what the hell I did to it, but it's finally feeling better now. Hello, Miami. Yeah, everybody just kind of give a little shout where you're from. We go till about 5 after doing this just to give folks a chance to sign in. Since people are coming from all over. Hello, England, Ireland, Scotland. Nice. Sasha is sleeping next to me on the chair. So when she sort of gets up and start moving around, I'll show her Tasmania. Nice. And of course, the little sunflowers on TikTok. Thank you. Dang, TikTok chat is crazy. It's always crazy. Someone is saying on you, I've got, just if folks don't know, I've got TikTok up there and I've got YouTube, which also is kind of Facebook and Twitter feeding in through there, but it's mostly just YouTube chat. And yes, YouTube chat is much smaller than the TikTok chat. It's a much crazier world with you folks up there. Also, a lot more questions. I typically get, God, we could have 100, 200 questions on TikTok. Not nearly that many on YouTube. So, in any case, yeah, folks, introduce yourselves. We are at almost 1,000. That's good. Yeah. Well, Monday, this seems to be Scotland. This seems to be a good time. It's 1 hour earlier than my normal time. When I'm in DC, we do this an hour later. But since I'm visiting family in Chicago for the next month, this works a little better here because then I figure around 6, I end around 6:30 our time here. I still have time to hang out with Ma. Oh, almost ready, guys. Like I said, we usually take a couple minutes, just folks saying hi, and then we dive right in. But this way, it lets folks kind of dribble in slowly. Takes a minute for folks to get here. As you all know, I'm going to be summarizing the news of the day first. Not as, interesting news as always. Not as much news today. So today will probably be more question and answer because I'd say about 3 pages of news. Usually I have about 4 pages to fill you on. Hello, Edmonton. Sweden. I've got Sweden news and Norway and Finland news. Exciting today. Iceland. Nice. But yeah, so I'll give you about probably 20 minutes, I'm guessing, of news. And then we'll jump into the question and answer. You TikTok folks should probably know that you got a Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. If you just, and thank you for the sunflowers, Peach. Bottom of the screen, you got a Q&A button. Use that to submit questions if you would, because that makes it easier when I get to the question period. That way they're all lined up in a row and I don't have to go back and scroll, which is nice. On YouTube, you all know you can use the questions in the bottom. Same thing for you though. If you submit the questions early on, I may not see them. If you submit them later when we're talking, Q&A, I'll see them. But I do make a promise. Oh, yes, Milk. We're going to talk about Transnistria. We are. But I do promise that if you buy a super chat question, I'll stop and get to that immediately as the next topic, since you are making a generous donation, and I appreciate that. But you don't have to buy questions to get questions, and just there's like 200 questions you guys asked, so I can't get to all of them. So as a favor and a thank you, I get to the super chat ones first. Other than that, I think that's it. Yeah. Oh, somebody did tell me, I never mentioned, if you want to just support me, you can also, there's a tip, at least on TikTok, there's a tips button on my profile page. I always forget to mention that. You can just give a tip to me. And what somebody had mentioned to me was apparently TikTok doesn't take a cut of those. So up to you. But I appreciate it. And I certainly appreciate all the funny little things you guys put on the screen on TikTok, which is why I at least attempt to give a shout out when you put them up there. So thank you. All right, guys. Yes, did have a happy Easter yesterday. It was Orthodox Easter yesterday. So I was with my family here in Chicago, playing with the puppy, my sister's new little 15-week, but still maybe 2-pound Yorkie poo puppy. Adorable. Estonia. Ooh, always love to see us, our Baltic friends in the building. Ireland. Yeah, feel free, if you guys feel free to keep sort of introducing yourselves as I'm starting with the news. I will say we are still, well, I'll get to that in a second. Let me just start with the news. Okay, we'll start with the news. So the big story today, one of the big stories today is NATO. Now, this is getting very interesting, actually, in terms of Sweden and Finland joining NATO, right? We've got two Northern European countries. Sometimes people don't realize they're not members of NATO, but they're not. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Association, the defense alliance of basically Europe and North America, Canada, United States, but not limited to North America and Europe. I actually did not even know that myself. Timothy, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I didn't know that myself until I looked it up a few weeks ago as to any country can apply to be a member of NATO. You don't have to be in the North Atlantic to be so. It just so happens that it tends to be Europe and America and Canada because we were initially a bloc set up to defend ourselves, especially from the Soviet Union in the East, and now yet again from the Russians in the East, who are kind of like the Soviets. In any case, so the big news today is the Swedish papers and the Finnish papers are both reporting that Sweden and Finland are going to submit their application to NATO come mid-May, around May 16th or something like that, which I found to be very interesting. There have been a lot of reports in the press about this the last week or two. You might have been seeing this, all these rumors about these two countries joining. Now, what is interesting to me is they're not there yet. I mean, the legislatures are still debating this, right? They have to have the legislatures, the Congress, the parliament, whatever it is in those countries, probably a parliament, debate these issues and then vote on it by the elected representatives. And maybe it has to go to the president or the prime minister too, who knows? But they're not there yet. So I've been really intrigued that government officials are clearly talking to the media and clearly saying from those countries, oh, we're joining. Now, Finland makes a little more sense because Finland, the latest polls I saw were something like 68% of Finns support joining NATO. Amongst the Swedes, it's simply a bare majority. So probably low 50 percentile, things like that. So very interesting. I was surprised on that. But nonetheless, the articles were pretty definitive and supposedly Swedish government officials weighed in and confirmed the story. So let's see what happens. They're still democracies. Still has to be approved by the governments, but very interesting news. Also, there was talk, but I couldn't find anything definitive. Thank you for that on TikTok. There was talk that if the countries were to apply to join NATO, right, they may not be, maybe it takes a couple of months for NATO to go through the process. In the meantime, NATO would offer some kind of security guarantees because otherwise they could apply to join NATO. Russia could attack them in the 2-month period before they join. And then what good is that, right? They're not members of NATO. They wouldn't get defended. So hopefully that would happen. Additional sort of war news, still no significant advance for the Russians in eastern Ukraine. They're still blowing things up. They're still shooting missiles around the country, and they're not advancing any. So they're not getting any significant advancements in the east. Ukraine says it shot down a number of air vehicles, drones and things like that, but also included a Russian fighter bomber, an Su-24, which is a big deal. So that's a good thing. I even saw some video on Twitter that I think was the plane going down. It was kind of freaky. The plane was like spinning as it was going down. It was almost a little too much, so I didn't put it on TikTok because I felt like it might have been a little too much for the TikTok censors watching this plane spin out of control, but it was pretty wild. Russia is continuing to shell residential neighborhoods in Kharkiv. We've talked about Kharkiv a lot. Kharkiv is the number 2 city in Ukraine, second largest city, population 1.5 million. It's in the northeast of Ukraine, and the Russians have been bombing the bejesus out of it since day one. We're talking today might be day 61 of the war, I think, so 2 months. And part of it was they wanted to take Kharkiv. I think that was their initial goal. They were going to get Kyiv, the capital in the north, but they really wanted Kharkiv. Kharkiv, it's like 20 miles max away from the Russian border. So what a great thing that they could have gotten the 2 largest cities like right away. They didn't. So they're still bombing it. They're going after residential areas. They've killed a lot of civilians, really bad. And that's the place that we've been doing our fundraiser. We still are. We're up to about $6,000 in your guys' donations. So thank you. We're hoping to raise a total of $10,000 to basically feed people in Kharkiv. I'll give a quick spiel on this, but then we'll go back to the news. People, a lot of elderly people and others are still at home. Either the elderly can't get out of their homes because they have nowhere to go, or other people also just feel like they don't want. I was watching CNN today, somebody on the front line with their kids, and they're like, we don't want to leave our home. Where do we go? The other problem is in towns like Kharkiv, they were saying almost all the children in town are in the subway now. And they've been in the subway for weeks, if not a month plus. And that's where they're living as their bomb shelter. These guys need food. Subways don't per se have food, right? People in their homes can't get to food. So we have been providing a lot of soup kitchen type things with aid around the country from your guys' money. A lot of money we've given them from you guys. I would say one kitchen alone got $4,000, but that was just in one bite. In any case, we're raising money now to get 2 used cars, fill them full of food, drive them cross country to Kharkiv, drop all the food with the food kitchens there, and then give the vehicles to the local soup kitchens because they actually deliver, because people can't get to them. So we're going to give them the cars then so they can take the cars and deliver the food. Anyway, we're at $6,000. We need $10,000. If you guys would still help, I'd appreciate it. You can donate. 100% of the money is going to this effort. I'm not taking any. Vlad's not taking any. You can donate in my profile via the beacon. Oh, that's really funny. Okay, that's pretty funny, Pisces. I've not seen that before. That's new. She just put a sombrero on my head or something. You can donate via the beacons link, and you'll see the very top links, top two, are how you donate. So you could donate. I prefer just directly to Vlad, but if you got to use my link, you can. And you've got it on YouTube. Okay, back to the news. So the lot of interesting bombings and fires breaking out. Really fascinating in terms of Russia and Eastern Ukraine, Ukraine overall. So you know how in the last few days we've had the Ukrainians. Well, the Ukrainians aren't admitting it, but we know it was the Ukrainians, right? The Ukrainians bombed 2 oil refineries that, well, we're sure it was them, even though they didn't admit it, 2 oil refineries across the Russian border. Just this week, I mean, there was also a bridge that they blew up, right? I'm sorry, that's what I was going to tell you. So yeah, last night. So last night was the 2 oil refineries they blew up right across in Berdyansk, which again is like across the border. I have to double check. I think this one was a little more north. I've got to double check. I looked at the map to see where it was, and I think it was a little more north. But they blew up 2 oil depots, oil refineries. They also bombed the railroad tracks that were being used to transport weapons from Ukraine, from Russia to Ukraine. Not just weapons, but I mean, material, tanks, trucks, all this kind of stuff. And it was tremendous. I mean, the video of this explosion last night was oil. I mean, it was a tremendous explosion. It shows that the Ukrainians continue to have this capacity to go across the border to bring the war into Russia. We had talked before. You guys had asked why Ukraine didn't do more cross-border attacks. And at the time, I was saying it has to be worthwhile. Like, it has to be an attack that there's a reason to do. They shouldn't just do it just to do it. In this case, they're going after oil. Oil is what the Russians need to keep the war going. And there's a psychological element as well, because the Russians are seeing that these things are blowing up. And mind you, they're spectacularly blowing up. I mean, the images are, plumes of fire going up 5-10 stories, right? I mean, it really is a spectacular fire. It lights up the whole town and people go, oh my God. And that has a psychological impact in addition to taking fuel away from tanks and trucks and everything else. So anyway, big deal on that. You also know in the, well, let me tell you what else happened. This is just the last week. Okay, previously you already had heard of other explosions and fires, right? There was some kind of a chemical plant related to the military. There was another military research center in the last week that caught on fire. There was a third one that I don't even recall. Now you got these things going on. Well, get this. There was a fire at an airbase, a Russian airbase near Vladivostok in eastern Russia. This is 11 time zones. You with your sombreros again. That's got to be a new one. Somebody's got to get a picture of that. It's 11 time zones east, Vladivostok, of Ukraine. I think I looked it up. It's 5,000 or 6,000 miles away. I mean, I have a hard time believing this is linked to Ukraine, but with everything else going on in the last week or two of things blowing up across Russia, it's very interesting that an airbase just happened to blow up. Throw into that mix, listen to this. And I found this one, somebody, the Kyiv Independent had shared it. And there's in a local Ukrainian newspaper reports that in the town of Kremina, which is eastern Ukraine, right, in that whole contested area the Russians are going after now, trying to win. Well, eastern Ukraine, the town of Kremina, occupied by the Russians. And I'm going to read you the direct translation from Google because it's more than good enough. And it's almost funny. I mean, it's so like this translation. Russian occupiers and collaborators exploded. It wasn't like they were in an explosion. They exploded in the city hall of the temporarily occupied. I love this too. Temporarily occupied. In other words, they're saying you're not going to be there for long. Again, this is the good guy press reporting. I'm going to start again. Russian occupiers and collaborators exploded in the city hall of the temporarily occupied Kremina when they gathered for a meeting. The head of the OVA, and I'm not sure what that is. I'm guessing some kind of government body. The head of the OVA. I'll go. Adjust my mic. Okay, is the mic flopping around? Maybe it is. Hang on. Well, depending which one here, I'm gonna. The mics are not as good here. I'll pull both mics. There we go. Now you got the mic on my shoulder. You got this mic, hopefully loud enough. So Russian occupiers and collaborators exploded in the city hall of the temporary occupied Kremina when they gathered for a meeting. The head of the OVA says that gas is to blame for everything. Now here's the quote. Here's the quote from the local official. In Kremina, the occupiers took to the air. Oh God, took to the air. I'm hoping they don't. They may mean went on the air. I think they mean literally took to the air. This is a very bitchy article from a Ukrainian paper who's clearly enjoying themselves. I missed this the first time I read it. In Kremina, the occupiers took to the air in the city hall during their gathering. Safety was not observed. Thank you again, Pamela. Safety was not observed. Gas, where was this? Sorry, I'm looking at my thing. Gas is, safety was not observed. Gas is such a thing, meaning like, gas can explode on you. Traitors appointed by orcs, these are the terms used for the Russians. So traitors meaning collaborators who were appointed by the Russian occupiers to positions were also in the room. In short, this is the summation. In short, according to local officials, hold meetings with no one else. There is nothing to put even in the balls. Now, I'm not sure what that expression means in Russian. I mean, I know what they're saying. Like, I don't know what the Russian expression, but there is nothing to put even in the balls. What they mean is there was nothing left of the occupiers and the collaborators to even put in a small vase or something. They were just utterly destroyed. But what I find ironic or whatever is that the article keeps claiming it was a mysterious gas explosion. These guys, man, hello. That's kind of cool. I haven't seen that before on TikTok. Thank you. These guys are so good at what they're doing, the Ukrainians. It's kind of amazing. So anyway, blows my, actually, it's very good. I mean, we laugh, but we're not laughing. It is very important that they're doing these kind of events because they need to be, especially in the occupied areas, they need to be taking on the Russians. They need to be doing guerrilla warfare and exactly the kind of warfare they're doing. This is what guerrilla warfare is, because somebody had asked the other day what guerrilla warfare was, and the word isn't guerrilla as guerrilla. It's Guerrilla, maybe, guerrilla warfare, and the idea is almost like private citizens forming cells of secret people that blow things up and they don't tell anybody during wartime, because the Nazis are in charge and they're the secrets in the background. It's that kind of stuff. It's the stuff they did during Hogan's Heroes in a way. Remember how, they were just prisoners of war, but they would blow things up on the side. That's guerrilla warfare. It's this sort of, it's not warfare with soldiers on the front lines. It's people getting together with their neighbors and the military and figure out how to blow things up. So very good to see that happening. Mariupol. So Mariupol, people always ask, we might as well say, Red Dawn. Exactly. Red Dawn that's funny. Stacey Morgan said Red Dawn. Red Dawn is guerrilla warfare for you Americans and maybe Brits. I'm not sure if the rest of Europeans know the cultural reference. It's funny and kind of a tacky movie. Mariupol. So people like their Mariupol updates. Still nothing going on there. Two interesting things. The Russians are claiming that they're going to let civilians leave. Utter BS. The Russians claim this every day. They're liars. Pretty much every time the Russians have claimed this through the entire war now for 2 months that they were going to let civilians leave an area, they lied. And sometimes they even bombed them, the civilians, as they were trying to leave. So do not believe the Russians as they're saying this. So whatever. The Russians say they're going to let them leave. Sure, they will. The other day, the Russians even dangled this in front of the civilians in Mariupol and told them, oh yeah, we'll let you leave. They got everyone to that is pretty cool, Pamela. They got everyone to the buses, got them in the buses ready to leave, and then said, oh, sorry, we can't let you go. It's all a psychological game the Russians are playing with the civilians, so just be aware of that. I was going to tell you something else about Mariupol. Oh, yeah, the fighting's still going on. Remember how, today's Monday, so was it last Thursday or something, how Putin said, oh, we're just going to stop now. We won in Mariupol. We're not going to fight anymore. It's ours. We won. He hasn't won. Still a holdout of 1,000 troops. Right? They're still fighting. Well, they're still fighting. I mean, as of today, the Russians are still bombing. They're still fighting. They're still trying to take over that area. They've got, I had heard last week, something like 10 or 12,000 Russian troops are still holed up, basically having to fight these people in the steel plant. And these are 10 or 12,000 troops that in principle could be used to fight, further up north in the east where the big battle's going on. Now, mind you, these troops are so exhausted, they probably can't go up there and fight, but the Russians will probably send them anyway. And this is one of the problems the Russians have been having in eastern Ukraine is they're using troops who just aren't ready because they've already been fighting in other parts of Ukraine and they need time off. They're not giving them time off. So in practice, the Russians would be sending these troops up, and they would be sending them up to fight in the east, but the troops are going to be tired anyway. I just thought it was interesting that the Russians are still fighting, and they claimed, oh yeah, we're just going to let them be. We don't care anymore. That was us. That was just for public. Thank you, Marcial, maybe. I can never get your name right, but thank you for the origami. So that was just for public consumption. They lied. Big surprise. Possible. Let me to first U.S. weapons. So yesterday, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken, U.S. Secretary of Defense. Oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. Secretary of Defense. That is a pretty cool hat. The two of them, our two secretaries, go to Kyiv. They meet with Zelensky. They meet with their counterparts. So the foreign minister, the defense minister there, and the U.S. announces, among other things, some kind of $300 million loan. Oh, there's a lot of new stuff coming out today, isn't it, Pamela? I haven't seen any of that stuff before. Some kind of a $300 million loan program or some kind of thing. And this was kind of interesting. $165 million sale of Soviet-era ammunition to Ukraine. Now, two things are interesting about this. The U.S. approved the sale of $165 million of Soviet-era munitions, including mortars, automatic grenade launchers, howitzers. What was interesting to me is that it's a sale, because some of you guys had asked me recently whether the aid we were giving were these weapons being sold to them, were they being given to them? And a lot of them, I think, have been given. In this case, it makes it quite explicit that it's a sale. So interesting, someday we'll get to the bottom of which is which, because I think the media also hasn't quite cared, because at this point, the more important thing is just getting them aid. So the reporters covering this, thank you, Ashley, for that. The reporters covering this haven't really been reporting as much on was it a gift, was it a sale, whatever. Possible Russian false flag in Transnistria. Actually, we've only got a couple more stories and we're done. I told you this was a quick one today. Possible Russian false flag in Transnistria. So Transnistria, a little confusing. I do love the Borg thing. It's pretty cool. But I am not an expert on Transnistria, but I can tell you in a nutshell, you've got Ukraine, you got Poland on the side, you've got all that fighting on the water here, like Odessa. You've got remember the Moskva, the ship that blew up down here. Thank you for that, Grandma. The ship, not my grandma, but TikTok Grandma. You got the ship that blew up down here. Well, over here, you've got Moldova, a former Soviet republic. When you go to Moldova and you get to the border area with Ukraine, and you've got a little area of land. It's really, I think it's 100 miles across. It's not big at all. A small area of land called Transnistria. And it's the sort of breakaway region that the Russians are occupying, and they've been occupying it for decades now. Only the Russians recognize it as broken away. Nobody else does. Kind of sound familiar, right? Like what the Russians are doing with Crimea, what they're trying to do now in eastern Ukraine. And the Russians have been making noises about moving in there. In the last couple of days, the Russians were talking about, once again, going after Odessa, kind of, in other words, going further rather than just the east, which they're still going to have a very hard chance winning at this point, starting to go west and starting to go after Odessa, and maybe even going there by Transnistria, Moldova, and doing it by claiming, just like they did in Ukraine, just like the Nazis did in Poland, I believe, was it? Was it Sudetenland, that, we have our own ethnic nationals we have to go defend. And they're saying the same thing in Moldova. Well, what happens today or yesterday? A bomb blows up at a government office building in Transnistria, in this region, and all of us are kind of looking at this and we're like, what is this? This is weird, right? I mean, I looked at it and went, that's kind of weird. Because here's the thing. It's the Russian occupied area government offices, which means it's the offices of the traitors, right? So why, Moldova doesn't like it, but why would Moldova blow it up now? Seems a little weird. Ukrainians, why would the Ukrainians blow it up now? Seems a little weird. Like, why would the Ukrainians be wasting their time with some breakaway region in Moldova when, frankly, they should be, spending their bombs on going after the Russians in the east? The Russians, I think, are trying to claim it was the Ukrainians or God knows who. It looks like a false flag. I mean, this may be. I'm trying to think if it's like the first really obvious false flag the Russians have done this entire thing. A false flag is. It's an important term. Thank you for that on TikTok. It's an important term to know. A false flag, well, I'll tell you in this situation what it is. Thank you for the merry-go-round. In this situation, a false is the perfect definition. Russia comes in. They blow up the government offices in Moldova and Transnistria. They claim Ukraine did it, and they use that as a justification for war. They say, even though privately we knew Russia blew up those government offices there. Publicly, we say, Ukraine blew up the government offices. It's not safe. We've got to send in all our troops to protect our ethnic nationals. And Russia, in essence, does a false flag operation. They did a false operation, a lie, to justify their own invasion. And that may be what they're doing. The only problem is, as I've talked about before, Russia's nuts if they think they're going to invade another country at this point. I mean, Russia is not winning this war in the East. The analyses keep coming, from the experts I'm watching. People say Russia's got like a week to kind of win this thing in the East, or they're in real trouble in Ukraine. They can't afford to have another front in a war. They can't afford to send even. They don't have enough troops. Knocking my thing around. They don't have enough troops in the East, let alone to say, well, let's take some of those troops and move them now across the entire country to Moldova and start fighting more people. They can't do it. And this is the same thing I keep telling you when Russia makes all of these, these threats about how they're going to go after NATO and they're going to go after Poland and the Baltic states and Finland and Sweden. They don't have the troops and they don't have the material to do it. These guys are having a very hard time trying to defeat the Ukrainians. They can't take on anybody else. I mean, Moldova, let alone, but they certainly can't take on NATO, right? I mean, NATO's got more weapons and more training than Moldova does, that's for sure. So don't believe, when they throw a lot of this stuff around, they're just trying to freak you out. And I will get to that at the end because we're going to have a little chat about nuclear war at the end of this little talk. Just a recent poll in Ukraine, just interesting. 84% of Ukrainians believe ordinary Russians are responsible for the war. That's 84%. According to a new poll by InfoSapiens Agency published on April 25th, 93% of Ukrainians believe in a Ukrainian victory over Russia. Interesting, very strong. While 72% are absolutely sure of it. So 72% absolutely sure means a little less, fair enough, but still very good. And the final thing I was going to mention, and then we'll jump into the questions. The Russian foreign minister, I almost called him Soviet. It's like, for those people of my generation and older, this is just a carbon copy of what we went through. It's the same old people. All of you younger people are finally getting, and it's not a good thing, but you're finally getting to experience what we all went through when we all got to watch, the Soviet Union and all that mess. This is what it was like, dealing with people who are just, when it comes down to it, pretty darn evil. And I will say this too, knock Reagan and all that for, I'm not going to take positions on Reagan right today with you all, but you get a sense now why Reagan used the phrase evil empire. I will bet some of you who are younger would probably look at the history books and remember that phrase and go, yeah, that's kind of a weird warmongering phrase to use. Now think of Russia today and everything you've seen, and think of the same thing happening back in the 1980s, 1970s, and a president using the phrase evil empire to describe Russia. Wouldn't sound so weird anymore. To use it today, you'd think, it's like if Biden used it today, you'd be like, oh, that was strong language, but true, right? Thank you for that, Cash. But kind of interesting. I say for history especially, you got to understand history in the context it's in. So don't just think you understand history by looking back and with today's eyes and looking back and saying, well, that's kind of ridiculous that somebody would call them an evil empire. That's very warmongering. But you don't realize at the time what was going on around you was exactly the kind of thing that's going on now around us, where we're looking at these guys going, they threaten nuclear war every day. They're not just attacking their neighbors, but literally they have a policy of trying to wipe out this country. It's genocide. They're rounding people up, tying their hands behind their back, shooting them, killing babies. It's evil. Anyway, I just think it's interesting from a historical perspective because it gives you, once you live through it, you kind of go, okay, I'm getting that nuance here. I'm not even going to talk about, the Russians threaten nuclear war again or something. I'm not even going to talk about it. I'm over them and their threats of nuclear war. We'll just leave it at this. I did my searching today. Apparently, it is not so easy to find. We're going to jump into questions now, but I'll just conclude. It's not easy to find exactly how many nuclear weapons the U.S. has where. And I think the reason is because according to the arms control treaties, we have to declare like how many we have and also like how many in aggregate. Like it said 1,500 on subs in the air, silos. It was like this aggregate number, but I could never find out how many nuclear weapons, actually nuclear bombs, we've got on submarines. We have at least several hundred. I suspect it's a lot probably compared to the other, like in the air and on the ground, because, and I raise this again, just to remind you, it's something to keep in mind whenever the Russians are talking about nuclear weapons and they kind of get you scared. We have a lot of nuclear weapons on nuclear submarines. Thank you, Jordy, for that. The Brits have most, if not all of their nuclear weapons on nuclear submarines. The reason you put nuclear weapons on nuclear submarines is because they go into the sea. They go 1,200, 1,500 feet down. The amount's classified. I tried to find out once, they wouldn't tell me, but probably 1,200, 1,500 feet down. Almost impossible to find. And Oh, I looked at the number we have. We've got something like 14 maybe operating nuclear submarines that have nukes on them, more or less. It's just impossible to find these. If the Russians could find a couple of them, it would be a really big deal. We'd still have 12 left. Well, that means hundreds, if not over 1,000 nuclear weapons we'd have at the bottom of the sea or 1,000 feet under. And if Russia were to attack the U.S., if Russia were to attack the U.S. and wipe out the entire country, or they go to Britain to wipe out the entire country, our nuclear weapons are still in the subs. Those weapons would be given a command those subs would be given a command to fire back and destroy Russia entirely. This is not a good thing, obviously. No one wants to see this happen. But the Russians know that's what would happen. It is literally impossible for the Russians to attack us first and wipe us out so that we can't respond. They could wipe us out. Thank you, Pamela. I still laugh at that. It's very, I haven't seen it before. They could literally wipe us out, and our subs would still in return wipe them out no matter how bad they did. I realize it's a weird kind of thing to tell you to reassure you, but it's important to keep in mind every time you hear the Russians. And I'll give you the quote now from Lavrov. The foreign minister said again, this was today's quote, "The risk of nuclear war is real. This danger should not be underestimated." All I got to say there is back at you, buddy. Back at you. He's trying to scare us. This is actually the reason they're saying this again is they're pissed off at all the weapons that are going from NATO and from other Western countries. There's not just Western countries, from countries in general. They're really pissed. And they're threatening nuclear war again because they don't know what else to say. And, by around the 10th or 15th time you threaten nuclear war, give me a break. In any case, the reason I say, you should worry about it because there can be accidents and things, but they know we've got nukes too, and they know we've got enough to destroy them. And, Anyway, all right, guys, let me jump in here with some questions. As I said, on TikTok, submit the questions via the Q&A link at the bottom, if you would. On YouTube, use the questions at the bottom. Just submit them there. And if you buy a super chat question like Tree Robotai, which I can never learn to pronounce, just did, I promise to get to it first. Otherwise, I'll get to your questions anyway. And, of course, by buying the questions, by giving me the cute little things on my head here, you guys are supporting my work. And I appreciate that because I'm quite literally doing this full time now. I've decided I'm just going to work on Ukraine full time, build up this sort of this TikTok YouTube base of you guys, and see if we can just keep doing this news show because I'm enjoying it and you guys seem to as well. At least enough of you. So, Tree Robotai, once our diplomats are back in Ukraine, now he's talking about the fact that one of the things that was discussed this weekend when our Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State went to Ukraine was bringing American diplomats back, and apparently that will hopefully be happening shortly. We removed American diplomats from Kyiv. I think we still have them in Lviv, which is the western city, with a lot of other governments because we were afraid of Kyiv getting attacked those first couple of days. Remember, we were afraid the Russians were going to be taking over Kyiv. Well, a lot of Western governments and other governments have now moved their diplomats back to Kyiv. We have not done it yet. The UK did, for example, and we finally said we're looking at doing it soon. So that's what he's referring to. Once our diplomats are back in Ukraine, or at least back in Kyiv, if Russia hits them or the embassy, do we put boots on the ground? Are we baiting them by going back? Not necessarily. Here's the thing. And I even Googled this to make sure who it was. Back when we bombed Serbia in 1991 or so, a bombing that a war that is I to this day support and laud, because the Serbians were committing ethnic cleansing of the Kosovars, Muslim Kosovars, and we accidentally hit the Chinese embassy and destroyed it in Serbia, in Belgrade. And I mean, at the time, it was kind of like, oh, God, we blew up the Chinese. Because the Chinese, of course, were pretty much siding with the Russians. As I recall at the time, they certainly weren't being helpful. And they were making a lot of noise. And it was like, oh, God. So it doesn't necessarily, I mean, if you accidentally hit an embassy because you're bombing the city at large, sure, if you want to, you can call it an act of war. I mean, it's up to the country in question. So the U.S. could call it an act of war. But I don't think the U.S. would consider it an act of war unless we literally had evidence that the Russians wanted to hit our embassy and tried to hit our embassy. If it were intentional, that would be an act of war. If it was by accident, I don't think we would. No. And that's not where we're going back. If anything, I think what you're seeing is the U.S. being much more reticent about going back. We're holding back about going back because of all the Benghazi stuff and everything else. For those of you who don't follow U.S. politics intimately, the Republicans gave Hillary Clinton a really hard time years ago because they weren't really diplomats. I think they were CIA, but nonetheless, 4 diplomats and CIA people died at our consulate in Benghazi, Libya. And the Republicans blew the issue up with 13 different hearings accusing Hillary Clinton of it. It was, of course, right before she was running for president. That whole thing, Pamela, thank you for that. And I think that has left a bit of a nervousness with current presidents about doing anything where our diplomats might be in danger. Not that they wouldn't be careful, but it's a diplomat's job to be in some danger. Like I would say at this point, other diplomats are going back. Our diplomats should be back. That's their job. Their job is to be in some areas that are not safe. And the only reason we're holding back, I think, is a little bit of Benghazi fear. Once burned, twice shy. So other question here from Thomas the Tank. I love that because I was thinking Thomas the Tank. Well, I guess it is Thomas the Tank. You're being funny. I guess it would be Thomas Le Tank if it was Thomas the Tank. Thank you for that, Kanausi. Russian blaming NATO is just weird since they have had NATO countries on their eastern USA and western Norway border since the 1940s. Yeah. He's talking about Russia blaming NATO for the invasion of Ukraine and how, oh my God, if NATO comes on our border, we have to invade first. Well, first of all, nobody was letting Ukraine into NATO. That was the whole problem, right? Ukraine has been saying for 14 years at least, I think it was 2008, that it wanted to join NATO. Thank you for that, imposter, on TikTok. That they've been wanting to join NATO, and NATO wouldn't let them in. And in the meantime, we let in like some former Yugoslavia countries. We let in some other folks. We didn't let the Ukrainians in. We did not want to let them in, right? I believe it was. I mean, I'm not up on my history totally on this, but it was Merkel, it was Sarkozy, in France and Germany. We didn't want to let them in, or we meaning the collective NATO. So there was no danger of Ukraine joining NATO. And now, especially now that once Putin came in 2014, he stole Crimea. That still does crack me up. I know I'm going to get in trouble somewhere for cultural appropriation for that, but it still makes me laugh. They keep putting this, like I said, like this cowboy hat and this little black mustache, like actually it looks more like the evil gunman in a cowboy movie on my face on TikTok. It's very funny. But with NATO, you put that cowboy thing on me and you made me forget what I was saying. I know the question, but hold on. I'm working on this, Thomas. So she's doing it again, of course, now just to be funny. They've had NATO. Oh yeah. So that was it. So not only was Ukraine not a member of NATO, not only was Ukraine not going to be joining NATO anytime soon, because NATO kept saying, we don't want you. NATO was afraid of Russia. I think they were terrified of Russia. They didn't want Russia to get pissed at us and maybe go to war and this kind of stuff. I mean, I don't want to go to war with Russia either, but again, it's part of that letting Russia control us kind of thing. We're letting them make us afraid. The other thing was once Russia invaded in 2014 and stole Crimea Peninsula in the southern Ukraine, they stole it. They annexed it as part of Russia. Nobody recognizes it. It's still part of Ukraine, but the Russians have annexed it. Once they did that, it makes it almost impossible for Ukraine to join NATO because Ukraine would already be at war with Russia, and if they joined us, it would be a NATO member at war. It would be kind of a mess. So that would have been a problem too. There was just the NATO thing was a lie, as you can see now. Anyway, I mean, first it was NATO, then it was Nazis. Now they're like for all-out genocide. Now they're thinking the Russians are saying, hey, maybe we should go take Moldova too, like this independent third country. Maybe we'll take them too. This is not about NATO. This is about Putin wanting a big gift he can leave in his name for his legacy, and basically reestablishing the Soviet Union. All right, Thomas. Yep. Okay, we got Thomas, Harvey. And if I missed anybody other than Harvey, let me know. But I think Harvey's the one I've got. Let's see. Thoughts on Starmer? Oh, Keir Starmer. That's right. Keir Starmer's the labor leader, right? I think isn't Keir Starmer the labor leader in Britain, the leader of the left? Tell me, just confirm that. But thoughts on Starmer banning Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn, who's the former British Labour leader, far left, socialist, but like wackadoo, crazy man. I say crazy man. I'm sorry. I'll take a position on this one because he was clearly pandering to anti-Semites and others. The man's just a little out there. From running as a Labour Party candidate after his disband NATO tweet. Is hostility like this okay? Oh, is hostility like this okay when discussing what should be a unifying issue? Was it the right time? Interesting. Well, so Corbyn came out last week. I want to say it was what, right? Was it maybe 5 days ago, 6 days ago or something? So the former Labour leader in Britain. So he's the former top guy of one of the two main political parties in Britain, right? The former guy on the left comes out and makes a comment last week about NATO being disbanded. Now, I'd have to see the quote again to see whether he said it should be disbanded. It's not necessary, but talks about NATO being disbanded. Now, that's, Marine Le Pen style stuff, which, by the way, that was on my list. I forgot to mention French elections. Marine Le Pen, the candidate of the fascist far-right party, lost. She got 41.5% of the vote to Macron, the current president's, so what would that be, 58.5? That is a significant difference. I know it sounds like a lot when almost 42% vote for a fascist, and it is, but it still is a significant victory. That's a lot. That's a big difference in percent, though, so that's good. In any case, yeah, he made this comment. It was idiotic. It was the wrong timing. Frankly, it's also the kind of stuff you'd expect from Corbyn, because anybody who last week is talking about disbanding NATO is on Russia's side in this whole thing. You don't, in the middle of this stuff, you don't talk about disbanding NATO. That's totally giving aid and comfort to Russia. And that was Corbyn's problem from the beginning. I did not follow English politics to the degree you guys do, UK politics, but the guy's he's typical old style lefty that like worships the Soviet Union and wish they didn't go away, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I don't have a problem with him saying he shouldn't run again, or as a Labour candidate at least, because you can't, yeah, I want everybody to unify, but Corbyn already made it clear he's not there to unify. He wants to be Marine Le Pen or Brexit guy, right? So I have no problem with it, no. Because at some point, you've got to fight back against people. At some point, you've got to say, okay, this isn't working, trying to hold everybody together. So, all right, guys, let me jump to the TikTok questions. See, you've already got 90 questions on TikTok. See, this is what I'm talking about. You guys are good, but you're very, 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 I was going to say questionable. That isn't quite the phrase I meant to use for you. But 90 questions on TikTok. You amaze me. The Easter thing, I wasn't quite sure what was going on, Ashley. I saw people kind of mentioning something. Ashley saying, did you see the Photoshopped Putin in an Easter service? I saw people say they thought it might be Photoshopped. I didn't see why, though. I didn't see sort of a video or an image where they particularly saw something weird going on. So I'd like to see it. I know we've been seeing a lot of stuff recently. Putin, when he was grasping that table the other day, and I did sort of a funny a roller coaster picture of him, and I did one in a Taco Bell too. But that one looked Photoshopped as well. Looked like some weird stuff was going on before. There have been a number of things that Putin, trying to make Putin look like he's not out and about, but out and about in meetings when he may not actually be. But I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know. I'd like to see the image to see what people were talking about. That's going to be tough. So Yulia asks, is there any way to get Ukrainian children back from Russia? As you know, there have been reports all along, and actually the Russians have made them too, that the Russians have taken a lot of Ukrainian children. President Zelensky said the other day that the number was something like 5,000 or something Ukrainian children. The problem is the Russians themselves threw out a number like 120,000, 140,000. I mentioned it in a video weeks ago of children that they've rescued, right? And we know from survivors from Mariupol, the town in the south, including the guy that wrote the essay that I put on my Substack, we know from them that the Russians have been basically forcing people, if they let you leave, they force the refugees to go to Russia. They won't let them go anywhere else but Russia. And the problem becomes, how do you get, especially children, if the children are there and the children are missing their parents and they're alone, how do you get them back when you don't even know they're there? How do we know, as let's say Ukraine, how does Ukraine know which citizens were killed and which citizens were kidnapped to Russia, right? Especially like the kids. What if they've got the kids and their families? Or what if the kids' parents are dead? Either way, how do you know the kids are there? You could think, for example, oh yeah, the family next door, they're missing. They must have died in the war. You wouldn't know Russia's got them kidnapped, right? Or the parents and the kids are gone. They must have died in the war. You wouldn't know that the parents did die in the war, but Russia kidnapped the kids. So I don't know how you get them back, because somebody in Russia would have to be honest about who they've got. And if you kidnap somebody, bottom line, if you kidnap somebody and don't tell anybody that you kidnapped them, how are you going to find them? Especially something like this, where it's kidnapping, potentially thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. So I don't know. I'm not very optimistic on that. I think it's very bad news. Bad news meaning I'm just not optimistic, unfortunately. Remove the question. All right. Tyson, and there are no dumb questions. I think I've told you this before. I've told somebody that before. No dumb questions. I really think that. I just think like it's a very rare dumb question. A dumb question would be like, is the earth flat? I might call that a dumb question. But usually speaking, people ask questions when they don't know the background. And on something like Russia and Ukraine, why should you know the background? Even for me, I mean, there's some questions I don't know the answer to, and I've told you guys when you ask, you can't know everything. So you should never have. That's one of the big tenets I've always believed in education stuff. Never be afraid of asking questions, and anybody who tries to mock you for asking questions, in general, just any case. All right, that's my pet peeve of the day. So we know Russia's goal is occupy or take over Ukraine, correct? But if Ukraine wins, which you hope, do they get Russia, or do they get a piece of Russia, or just peace and quiet? It's not a dumb question. If Ukraine were to win and occupy part of Russia, they could try to get part of Russia. The problem does become that whole nuclear thing. I mean, I still am not convinced that Russia uses its nuclear weapons, because if they do, it's World War III and they lose too, because we've got nukes. But, if Russia were to lose some of their land, they'd probably freak out. Now, I'd have no problem with Russia losing some of its land, but that's how it would have to happen. It would have to happen because, Ukraine pushed the Russian troops back and back. And what happens? The Russian troops then cross back into Russia, and the Ukrainian troops keep going, and they keep beating up the Russians and beating up the Russians. And all of a sudden they're 10 miles, 20 miles into Russia, and they stop. Well, if I were Ukraine, I mean, you'd have to think of the strategic implications of this, but maybe you'd want to create a 10-mile border or a 20-mile border zone in Russia that was occupied by Ukrainian troops as a buffer. So the Russians couldn't, sort of a safe no man's land or something where the Russians couldn't come and attack you. So the only way you'd be able to do it, though, is beating Russia back so far that you then cross into their land and you take some of their land. Frankly, the same thing Russia's trying to do in reverse. Not just take the whole country, but Russia's also trying to see if they can just take some of the country in the east now. So not a dumb question at all. I just think, in the end, the West would probably say, ooh, we're scared, don't do that. We don't want to piss off Russia too much. But, there's something to be said for the best bargaining chip you could have with Russia is having some Russian land. Because otherwise, what's Ukraine's bargaining chip, really, right? Currently, at least up until now, the negotiations were over, how much of Ukraine was Ukraine going to give away? What did Russia have to give away? So, yeah, no, I think it's an interesting question, actually. But it requires Ukraine winning some, and, we'll see if, no, they're expected to do very well, but whether they would do that well. I don't think NATO will interfere if Moldova gets bombed. No. Akala-Sony, I'm going to say, although it could have been Akala, so New York, not sure. Will NATO interfere if Moldova gets bombed? I don't think so. We didn't interfere when Ukraine got bombed, so to speak. And Ukraine's at least more of an ally. Moldova, the only thing I will say this. We talked about this last week because I was looking at the map, and I want to say Moldova probably borders Romania. Am I correct, guys? All you savants out there. Moldova, pretty sure it borders Romania. At the very least, it borders a NATO country. I know that. I think it's Romania. Yes, Romania. Thank you, Ragged Android. The fact that if Russia were to move in and take over Moldova, the fact that Russia has now gotten closer to NATO borders would still weird us out a little bit, especially because they're doing it by force, meaning they're moving their military there in an invasion, because it would make us worry, do they plan on going into Romania next? So that would be a thing. I think what it would do is it wouldn't cause us to bomb Moldova. It would cause us to move a lot of more troops and weapons into Romania and move them forward to protect Romania as a member of NATO. That would be my guess. Beep, beep, beep. I got a headache again today, but hopefully I'm getting over these headaches. They kind of went away and they came back again. I'm a little annoyed. Anyway, Putin could be ill. Babby, or Babs. Babby, I'm calling you Babs D. Do you think Putin is ill? He could be. He looked pretty bad the other day. The picture I put up of him, like looking at he was on the roller coaster. I mean, first of all, put it up to intentionally mock him, because that's part of what you do with these kind of things. You do psychological warfare against the other guy. I do love the Borg thing. That's pretty cool. That's got to be new. Thanks, Jessica. Like during the Gulf War, George Bush the father. So George Bush, the first Gulf War, which was, the more justified Gulf War, I'll put it that way. George Bush the father used to call Saddam Hussein. See, even I came out and said Saddam because I'm used to it. And I believe Bush was briefed at the time that the name is Saddam, but in order to offend him, call it Sodom, because it sounds like Sodom, right? Put a little letter on the end there, sometimes. And it was meant to offend him. So psychological warfare is part of what you do with this stuff. But anyway, Putin was looking really sick the other day. He was swollen. His face was swollen. He was grabbing the end of the table. His other hand was moving, but this end was just grabbing the table. It looked like Parkinson's. I saw something the other day showing them from a couple of years ago walking into the big entry hall in the Kremlin, and you see his hand swinging like a soldier walking in, and the other arm is up against him like this. He looks like he's got Parkinson's or something. So who knows? And there was talk about whether he had thyroid cancer as well. Anyway, lots of stuff there. So let me, Daniel, I'm going to get rid of that question. And then Daniel, I'll jump to you. I think it's Daniel. Let me see here. Yes, Daniel O'Neill. Hello, Daniel. What happens if Ukraine cuts off? Oops, sorry, put that down so I can see this. Up there you go. See, I almost missed that. Thank you. I just put the cash. Thank you for that. What happens if Ukraine cuts off fuel supplies to Germany by attacking pipelines within Russia? That was interesting because that's part of what might have been happening in the last day. I'm also seeing a lot more threats to that Crimea bridge. Well, Daniel asked again, what happens if Ukraine cuts off fuel supplies to Germany by attacking pipelines within Russia? So we know that Europe gets a lot of its oil and gas from Russia. Some of it comes by boat. A lot of it comes via pipeline, right? So thank you for that. Stanky. A lot of it comes by a pipeline. And the oil depots that were gone after last night, I thought I read something. That's okay. For Life, thanks for joining us. You can always watch it on YouTube. But I appreciate you joining us because we'll go another 25 minutes of questions and then we'll hang out a little bit. But thanks for joining us. Sorry, I just happened to see somebody's comment saying it was getting late. I'm going to guess you're probably in Europe or somewhere else. So I appreciate you joining us. So Ukraine attacks these oil depots. Thank you for that, Flower Lady. And I read in one of the articles that they're oil depots where somehow this is oil that is used to export to Europe. And I went, ooh, that's interesting, right? These Russian oil depots. And it got me wondering whether this wasn't Ukraine's way of starting to harm some of the oil facilities. I'm not convinced they would be so brash about it because it's a little risky for Ukraine to do that. Because, if they literally outright were to blow up the oil refineries or whatever it is, the oil depots that are used for shipping oil to Europe, Europe's going to say, you literally just cut off our energy. The hell with you. We're not giving you any more weapons. So I have a hard time it's happening deliberately, but I still read that last night and went, oh, that's interesting. You and your bridge to Crimea. There's, the Ukrainians may be leaving the bridge to Crimea because they're thinking someday they need that bridge to retake Crimea. That's my only guess, but there's got to be a reason to why you leave infrastructure unless you're thinking you may want to take the infrastructure. That's my guess. Alicia 72. Can they send peacekeepers to Moldova only if Russia agrees? The peacekeepers apparently, actually, you guys have done the research, I think. Thank you, Kanausi, for those lights. The peacekeepers have to be agreed to by the United Nations Security Council. Russia is on the United Nations Security Council, and Russia can veto it. So if Russia vetoes it, it doesn't happen. There's no way Russia would want to send UN peacekeepers to stop it from invading Moldova. This is also the problem with Ukraine, right? How do you get the UN involved to do something if Russia can stop the UN from doing it, right? So good question. Unfortunately, not much they can do. Thank you for that at the bottom of the screen on TikTok. Dilly or Diffie, I'm not sure. Questions. Let me, I'm going to scroll down a little bit so I get a mix of you guys. Okay, Ashley got a picture of me with the hat. Thanks, Ashley. No news on the pregnant girls by the Russians. I know that was the issue of 9 of 25. There were 25 women reportedly violated. We try to use euphemisms because TikTok doesn't like it. I don't know, YouTube does either. But by Russian soldiers routinely in one town. It might have been Bucha, I'm not sure. And 9 of the women ended up pregnant. Really, really horrible. International Brigade, no news. What I did see was an interesting little story yesterday that I saw a video actually of some apparently Israeli troops or, people that used to be Israeli military volunteering to fight in Ukraine. And it was an interview with them or something, a video. It was in Hebrew. I don't speak Hebrew. I couldn't understand it. But the video being shared said it was this Israeli brigade or Israeli unit or whatever that was volunteering. And as you know, the Israelis tend to be quite good at these things. So very cool. Otherwise, I don't know anything else beyond that. No. Sky Queen. Would Putin not care about the backlash for using nukes if he feels like he's losing? Thank you for that. If he feels like he's losing his power, even if that meant all of Russia pays. Potentially, here's the thing, right? Putin, I think I'm more worried about these sort of theater nuclear weapons, these tactical nuclear weapons, these weapons that these small right? It sounds funny to say it, but it is true. You've got super large weapons, and you've got small weapons. The small weapons, I think I read, are like 1/3 of the size of Hiroshima, which sounds really big, but it's not compared to some of the huge ones you've got today. So the small ones are used for blowing up in the military field, to blow up a headquarters, freak out the troops. The large ones are for blowing up cities, right? I don't see Putin using the large ones to blow up cities. The concern is that he uses one of these weapons that's a smaller one that is used to blow up troops or something, and puts us in a weird position, because if he uses a big nuke and blows up Kyiv, then we're all going, it's World War III, literally. Then we're all going to war. There's no choice. If he uses a small one in a field and blows up, 100 troops or 500 troops, all of a sudden, and I'm not saying my opinion, but I'm saying I could see NATO going, well, what does that mean exactly? Yeah, it was a nuclear weapon, but it was a small nuclear weapon. I mean, again, this is not my argument, but I could see like a politician going, I guess we've got to do more because it's really horrific, but it's not quite like he nuked a city. So you get into that weird zone. That's the weird zone of worrying of what Putin would do, is this weird zone, like you said, of him balancing the risk and saying, well, maybe I could use a tactical one, freak out the Ukrainians, and maybe Europe will try to cut off oil or something, but who knows? But that's I think the risk. I don't see it as, because you know what? I mean, give me a break. If Putin loses Ukraine, Putin might lose his job. He's a dictator. But at some point, I would hope the military or the intelligence services would stand in. If Putin loses in Ukraine, he's probably going to lose his job. He's going to be in trouble. He might lose his life. But going nuclear, literally like launching an all-out nuclear attack against the West because Putin lost Ukraine, I would hope everybody else in Russia is going, okay, look, really sucks we lost the war there, but we're not going to literally end all life on the planet, including all of our lives, because you had an embarrassing day in Ukraine. So anyway, personally, I'm not so worried about it. I do think the calculus becomes, what does Putin think we will do to him if he just uses a small nuke? And that's the dangerous one. Wendy Hendy, 20. Financing is different from previous U.S. military assistance. Oh, there you go. It's not a donation of drawn down U.S. stockpiles, but rather cash that they can use to buy supplies that they might need. That may be the $300 million, I'm guessing. Is that correct? Wendy was just reading something from the paper about some of the additional aid we're giving to Ukraine. And I think what she's reading is the $300 million that of the financing I was talking about that we gave, in addition to, what was it, $165 million of Soviet-era munitions we've approved the Ukrainians to buy. Whereas in this case, it's financing not a donation of drawn down, but rather cash that they can use to buy supplies that they might need. So planes, she asked. So she's asking planes. I don't think so. I don't think we're letting them get to planes yet. I will say this. We already know now that there have been multiple weird examples of tanks disappearing in Eastern European countries. I think we've now got Poland twice now. Tanks have just disappeared. A bunch of Russian T-72 era Soviet tanks disappeared. Where'd they go? I don't know. And 2 other countries, maybe Czechia and Slovakia, I'm not sure. But 3 countries now where the Russian tanks, no, I say Russian tanks, meaning Soviet-era tanks that those countries had that Ukraine knows how to use, thank you for that cash, have just disappeared, which pretty much means they were given to Ukraine. Could the same thing happen with the planes? I don't know. I guess part of it becomes, can you transfer a plane without people knowing? That would be part of it. If you can get a plane across the border in a way that the Soviet reconnaissance satellites wouldn't know, maybe. I hope so. Clearly, I will say this. Ukraine, and I know I've got a couple questions queued up. The Ukrainians are very happy. The Ukrainian government is very happy with where things stand right now in terms of assistance. That was made clear this weekend when Zelensky and his government responded to the meeting with the Americans. They seem very happy, which to me means they're getting the stuff they need, or they're about to get the stuff they need. But clearly, the U.S. position on the war in particular has changed. We want Ukraine to win now. We want Russia to lose. That it took a while to get there. I think it was complicated why we didn't want to get there, because the U.S. bought into that whole nuclear war thing. Like, remember we were doing from the beginning. We were going, well, we don't want Russia to win, but if Ukraine wins and Russia loses, then that's really bad too, because Russia will use nukes and blah, blah, blah. Thank you for that. for the little sea floor thing. And now I think we're sort of coming to the realization that this is really bad what's happening. This is genocide, and we have no choice but to stop it. And Russia's clearly a threat to the rest of the world now. Okie dokie, Wendy. Seashell, that's cute, very cute. I get the pun. Is Russia in the United Nations? Yes. If so, why and how to get them out? Good question, kind of hard. There's a couple things here. First of which is, arguably maybe we should leave Russia in the United Nations, because that's kind of the whole point of the United Nations, is to have countries come together even when they hate each other, even when they're at war, so that maybe we find a way of bringing them together. It reminds me of the whole idea going back with the Olympics and how they would stop the wars, from what I remember, ancient Greece, to have the Olympics. And the idea was it didn't matter. The whole point was if you were fighting, you would still stop and you would come together. And today that's kind of a hard concept to deal with, obviously, but nonetheless, I could see somebody arguing that Russia shouldn't be kicked out entirely of the UN, because then what's the point, right? Then we can't come together. There's an argument for why Russia should be on the United Nations Security Council, which is where they get their permanent seat and their veto, that they're able to cancel everything, because a much bigger issue, but it still boggles my mind that we agreed to this. The Soviet Union had a seat on the United Nations Security Council, okay? Whatever. Right? All of us kind of got together, formed the UN. Soviets got their seat in acknowledgement, post-World War II power, or whatever. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, why did Russia get the Soviet Union seat? Ukraine had just as much a right to it. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Moldova, Georgia, all of them. Tajikistan, all of them had just as much of a right to that seat, because all of them were successor governments to the Soviet Union. None of them, Russia shouldn't have been first among equals. Why? Russia wasn't, Soviet Union didn't become Russia. The Soviet Union dissolved, and each republic, there was a Russian republic, there was a Georgian republic, there was a Ukrainian republic, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. Each republic became an independent country. Why didn't they share the UN Security Council? Why didn't they rotate at least? And each one, I think there's 14 or 15, maybe 15 Soviet republics there were. Each one gets a seat 1 month at a time, and it rotates among them. But giving it to Russia was the biggest freaking mistake we could have ever made. And I still think it's the kind of thing we ought to revisit, because that's a fair point to bring up. Russia should never have been given that seat. It's, again, we did the pandering to Russia thing at the expense of Ukraine and others, because Ukraine should have gotten it at least part-time. Harvey, Anonymous, the hackers group just hacked into Russian state TV. Oh, God. Displaying the names of all the confirmed dead soldiers. Really? How long will it take before Russian mothers begin to realize their sons aren't coming back? I'd be curious to look at how it happened in Afghanistan. And what I mean by this is, we know in Afghanistan, I have to crack the door, but I'm finally getting warm in here. We know in Afghanistan, after 10 years of war, the mothers' movement became very strong in Russia. Thank you for that. Can now see the anti-war movement among the moms became very strong. The moms of the dead soldiers, maybe wounded soldiers as well, and it, I guess, played a role in bringing down the Soviet Union. And I don't know, though, how long it took to build up, and I don't know, how quickly these things happen. Because, for example, beginning of a war, you can imagine people are going to rally around the flag. So you're going to have a lot of people supportive of the government just because they have to be. Somebody was saying, for example, when people were saying, aren't the parents going to start speaking up, and families, somebody said, well, with the war in Iraq went on 20 years, how many family members of U.S. soldiers did you see speaking out and criticizing the U.S. military and criticizing the U.S. president? Unless it was for partisan reasons, you didn't see a lot of that going on. You didn't see families criticizing them. You saw some, but the majority of the families, for whatever reason, they didn't really want to criticize it after their poor kid had died. It was just so I don't know. I don't know what it will take. I think what's smart is that they're finding ways of making sure people are getting word of the deaths, Ukrainians are doing something too like that, which is kind of wild, but using, I'm guessing it's probably that Israeli technology or something. Thank you, Pamela, for that. But identifying the war dead, the Russian war dead, and contacting their families back in Russia and letting them know that their child has died, and not to rub it in, but to let them know. And it's an interesting move. It could be cruel depending on how they do it, but it's an interesting move because the Russians aren't telling people, they aren't even telling people their loved ones died, right? Look at the at least 10 families from the Moskva 10 families have gone public to complain in a dictatorship, which means there's a lot more families that don't know and are complaining, but went public to complain that the government won't tell them anything about what happened to their kid. Are they dead? Are they missing? Are they hurt? They imagine not even telling them, 10 of them. So it's not like your kid's missing. It's a state secret whether your kid is even missing, hurt, or dead. That's ridiculous. That's the kind of stuff, that maybe could kind of build into something more. So anyway, yeah, so the Ukrainians, potentially cruel, but they need to handle it right, have been contacting the families of the soldiers and letting them know too that, we're happy to return the bodies too. I mean, they're not just going to sit on them, but I think one of the things Ukrainians have been saying is they would return the bodies in exchange for prisoner swaps, which is, not a terrible idea. It's still a prisoner swap. Why not? That Borg thing is so cool. I love Star Trek. That's really, I'm assuming that's new because I've not seen that before. Still got my headache tonight. Oh, it's annoying me. Well, maybe we will. Why aren't we seeing more IRA-style guerrilla attacks? Tesla asks. Tesla Titan. Timely day for you. Ooh, I see crazy people. There you go, moderator on TikTok. Look at that. I love to watch the TikTok mods in action. Somebody was posting God knows what weird thing, and all of a sudden it was like, disappeared. Yay. Let's give a quick sunflowers on the screen, at least on TikTok, for the mod who just did that. That was pretty good. Without invoking the IRA per se, but the idea being more guerrilla attacks. I don't know. First of all, I don't know. Now a lot of sunflowers are coming on for getting rid of the troll. Very good. I don't know. I guess to some degree we don't know how many. Oh, that's right. That cool thing. We don't know to what degree there have been guerrilla attacks. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what we don't know. And what I mean by that is, in Russian occupied Ukraine, it's harder to get the news. Like Mariupol, how much heroism was there in Mariupol? We don't know. How much street to street violence was there? People, stopping the Russians from going street to street to clear out the city? We don't know because the town's still occupied. So it's hard to know that there isn't more going on because we only know what we know, and that's information that leaks out. I'd be curious. That's an interesting question for John Spencer, if I remember to tweet him later, but sort of the urban warfare expert, and to tweet him and ask if he's seen any indication of widespread, guerrilla movements. Now, even for him, he may talk to people who are telling him privately what's going on, but saying don't tell it publicly, right? Who knows? Because they don't want to necessarily ruin it for everybody. Guerrilla attack tactics are very useful in the forest, not in the city. Yes, well, the only thing is in the city, what John Spencer talks about is, it still is guerrilla, though. He's talking about setting up, basically, the idea is the Russians come over and they try to take over a city. You set up all those hedgehogs. I learned the term, I think, from you guys. Those big, like you take railroad ties and you like this and this and this, right? Almost like a jack that you throw. And they're really tall. They could be the height of a man or something. And you've got a number of these in the street that can stop tanks, but you force them, basically you set them up in a way so there's a maze. So that, I'll do it this way, so that to go up a street, you've got to go like this. Well, if you're going like this, you can go pretty fast. If you're going like this, you've got to go slow and maneuver. Well, what happens when you're going very slow like this? Somebody hangs out the window of their house and they drop a Molotov cocktail on you. Someone hangs out the window and shoots a rocket-propelled grenade at you, right? So that's the kind of guerrilla warfare you'd see. Now, rocket-propelled grenade may not be guerrilla, but it is if you're hiding within buildings and everything else. One of the points Spencer makes a lot is that once the Russians start knocking down residential buildings and buildings, it actually makes it harder for them, because every time a huge building is knocked down, it's a plethora of hiding spaces for guerrillas to hide in. Because it is very, well, you can imagine, right? If a building's knocked down and you've got this rubble going on for I don't know how long, but all the buildings rubble, it's difficult for bullets and even like tank, artillery or whatever to get through that rubble. So that it makes it a great place for fighters to hide and start to, kind of sneak out. And he has a whole recipe for how to do this. You're not really supposed to stand in the street and shoot because it's more dangerous. You should do it from a window. He has like a guide he put out that people are now sharing in Ukraine of like, you should make a little hole in a wall going to outside the building, put some material covering it so the Russians can't see. And you literally like peek out the hole. Maybe the hole is just this big enough so your sight can see it too, to fire and then go in. So when the Russians look at the wall, they see a wall of a building. They don't see an open window. They just see and they don't see that there's a hole in it. Really, anyway, a lot of complicated stuff, but we don't know how much of that's actually going on. So who knows? Sergeant Kabula or Kabuta? Kabuto. Sorry, I'm trying to read this without my glasses. Thank you for that. Let me pull up another. I'll pull up another TikTok because we usually stick with a lot of YouTube questions all day. I'll do another 5-10 minutes. And then we'll just do it, and maybe 6 minutes, and then we'll do our hanging thing we usually do. I don't know. I mean, Edgar Perez asks, does Russia want to use chemical weapons in Ukraine? That's kind of the big question that we've been asking, along with the small nuclear weapons as well. I mean, Russia doesn't have any problem using them, we believe. I think the question becomes what Russia thinks we're going to do in response. And hopefully there's some vagueness there that they don't know. And if Russia doesn't know what we're going to do in response, then maybe Russia wouldn't be so willing to use them. But there is absolutely concern that Russia could use chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, but also chemical, because let's face it, nuclear weapons have their own fear factor. So even a small nuclear weapon, again, I almost laugh saying it because it sounds silly to say a small nuclear weapon, but it is a thing. Even a small nuclear weapon is a nuclear weapon, and people go, oh my God, Russia set off a nuclear bomb. Holy cow, right? Even a small one changes the world. Whereas Russia set off a chemical attack is horrifying. Thank you for that. Is horrifying, but it wouldn't cause the exact kind of horror you'd get from Russia launched a nuclear bomb, right? So I fear they'd be way more lucky to use their nukes. Yeah, I do. Oops, I had something start, but I think Harvey. Yep, I already got your thing up there. Let me find another question here any other questions on God, this headache is driving me nuts today. My headaches were leaving last week, and hopefully they're going away now. I hope so. All right, you guys are making it hard on TikTok. All right, if you have more questions on not TikTok, YouTube, if you have more questions, put them up there. Otherwise, I'm going to TikTok because my TikTokers have got like 150 questions here. God bless you, TikTokers. Do anything fun while in Chicago. Okay, we can talk about that during our hangout period that starts in 4 minutes. But I'm hanging out with family. It's been fun. I mean, I like hanging out with my family. My mom's old, so I like hanging out with her when I'm home rather than going out and doing stuff. The Russian satellites suck? I don't think so. I would think the Russian satellites are probably, I would think the Russian satellites are probably pretty good, but nowadays we've learned perhaps not to overestimate the Russians, correct? Prisoner of war? Nope. We see occasional discussions on prisoners of war, right? And the Ukrainians and the Russians exchanging some, but not like it's not like a huge thing like 2000 and 2000. I think that stuff's being kept for the end of the war. Thank you, Zena. I would love to teach. I worry nowadays teaching would just be too much of a political mess. Imagine teaching history too. Oh my God. Getting math would almost be easier. I mean, not that I want to teach math, but I would love it. I love to lecture and go to schools and stuff, but I just worry that all the political stuff has gotten so nasty that half the people would Google me and be excited, and the other half would Google me and go, he's teaching our kids. Stop him. I mean, I don't know, Cameron. That's interesting, Cameron. What's the biggest humanitarian concern in Ukraine? I'm going to guess feeding people. I'm going to guess food and water. Because, I mean, certainly Mariupol was sort of the biggest, most concentrated. You had a town of 450,000 people that maybe a couple 100,000 remained. I mean, even now we think there could be 100,000 plus people in that town. They've been bombed for 2 months. They were cut off from all food and water almost 2 months ago. I mean, they've had to find somewhere they'd be dead, right? If you didn't have water, you pretty much have to have water within 3 to 5 days or you're dead. So clearly they're getting water. You can go without food for about 3 weeks, but it's been 2 months. But they've been cut off of food and water. They were cut off from heating, nonstop bombing. That would be the immediate concern, would be the citizens of that town, I think, in terms of a specific area. Nationwide, I'm guessing it's going to be food is the big one, which kind of makes sense, I guess, if you're thinking humanitarian. The other thing would be clearly homelessness, so to speak, because you've got so many people. Oh, hell, a couple of weeks ago, the number was up to 10,000 Ukrainians that were either internal migrants or internal refugees or external. They left the country. So you had a quarter of the country that was forced to leave their home, whether they were internally or external, whether they were into the country still or external. They had to leave. It would be like you and me having to flee our homes and go to another state. What do? Right? It's costing you money. Like, where do you stay? Do you have money? You're not working. So that is the probably larger concern is feeding all these people, and how do you just take care of the refugees? Now, the concern coming up is food as well, because of Ukraine being very important, and Russia as well, for wheat exports to the world. And those wheat exports, a lot of wheat fields aren't being planted because of the war. A lot of the exports Ukraine already has ready to go aren't getting exported because the Russians have blockaded the water in the south. Ukraine is on the Black Sea, and they've blockaded it. Where the Moskva, where that ship went down, they've blockaded it with those ships so that any Ukrainian ship trying to leave to bring its wheat will get blown up in principle. So anyway, lots of different humanitarian concerns. But did we have anything else on TikTok? I see somebody saying John is right. I love that, Tatiana. Not sure what I'm right about, but thank you. There's my sombrero. I say sombrero. Maybe it's not a sombrero. It kind of looks like what. Any other questions on here? Otherwise, I'm going to grab another TikToker, guys. Okay, I'll pick up famous in a few. Why not? This will be the last one we do. Famous, unless somebody buys a super chat question. Otherwise, this will be the last one. The risk of a nuclear war shouldn't be underestimated. Lavrov earlier said that if World War III were to take place, it would involve nuclear weapons and be destructive. Yeah, I just think they're bluffing. I mean, the thing that bothers me about it is there's no difference between what the Russians are saying. Put my jacket on. And let me put it this way. Everything they say applies back to them. We should be worried about nuclear war. Yeah. And you know what? They should be worried about nuclear war too. Right? We should be worried. Yeah. So should they. And the fact that they know that we've got these weapons, that they know that we've got so many of our weapons, possibly over 1,000 even, on submarines, and that those weapons will survive any nuclear exchange and destroy Russia in return, means they should be worried about nuclear war, and it means it's less likely to happen. Now, you have to worry about accidents and things. I mean, that's certainly an issue, right? We know about that. I mean, just, somebody seeing something and they mistake it for an attack or whatever. But I think we should be worried about it. We should be cautious about it. But I do not believe it should be part of our negotiating position. I do not believe that we should be making decisions about sort of day-to-day things in the war of how we're supporting Ukraine based on this fear of nuclear war. I think it's BS. I don't mean BS from you. I just think it's not a lie, but we should worry about attacking Russia with nukes because they'll attack us back. Yeah. But the idea of we're going to, provide planes to Ukraine and Russia's going to get upset and nuke us, give me a break. They're not, because we've got nukes too. I think it's other than a mistake, but the problem is too, mistakes can happen anywhere. Mistakes don't have to happen just because we give them fighter jets or don't give them fighter jets. That doesn't change the possibility of a mistake. I don't know. Maybe I need to talk to some of these people, because I have some military friends who are very worried too. I just don't get it. I don't get it. The nuclear war concern, I just feel like it's blown out of proportion. I really do. I mean, of course you have to worry about it. Thank you, Wilson, for that. Of course you got to worry about it, because even if there was I think somebody said to me once, or it was true, like even if there's a 0.01% chance of the whole world getting blown up in nuclear war, you got to worry about it, because it's a 0.01% chance of a lot of really bad, 7 billion people dying. So that's not nothing. But yeah, I'm not there on the concern meter, I have to say. All right, guys, we're going to hang out for another 10 minutes. Feel free to continue hanging, folks. I'll hang for another 10 as well. We talk about anything that is not horrible Ukraine news. We did Easter yesterday, so that was nice at my sister's. She ordered, actually it was interesting because usually we do a big lamb in the backyard, but she ordered a bunch of Middle Eastern food that was nice because it kind of reminded us of Greek. We had chicken kebabs and kefte, which is funny because kefte in Greek, they're called keftedes, which are Greek meatballs, and kefte are basically meatball skewers, maybe we'd call them in English. I don't even know, but they're meatball shish kebab. Thank you. That can now see. So it was very good with hummus and tzatziki and everything else. And then I made a pasticcio that was very good, my pasticcio. And of course, after I made the pasticcio, I totally forgot about, I'm at my mom's because of the wooden paneling. Somebody else noticed that too before. Yeah. I got to tell you, I grew up with the wooden paneling. I mean, this is literally probably from the 1940s. I like it. I know it's not modern, but it's very homey to me. I've always liked the wood feeling because I grew up with this. I like homes that are a little bit darker with lamps to light them up. I don't like a big white room. To me, that's too bright. And I think it's because I grew up with this kind of an environment. It's funny. It's funny you notice that. In any case, but it was nice though. But I thought after I made my pasticho, which is a well-known Greek dish yesterday, of course, after I made it, I thought, why didn't I video this? I mean, it didn't have to be fancy. I simply could have videoed each thing and put it together. Thank you, Christy. I think it was Christy. I always love when you do that. Every time I forget, you do it, and then you do it, and I love it. Thank you. Elon Musk. Somebody asked about Elon Musk buying Twitter. I did a video on TikTok on this, and the thing is, there are a lot of different angles to the story. Some of which I'm not sure I want to totally get into because we are still making this, our apolitical show with me and you guys. I want this to be something where, Republicans and Democrats, left and right, come together and we basically agree on the need to save Ukraine and stop the Russians. So I don't want to get into that. I will talk about one side of the Elon Musk issue. Two sides of it, actually. One is, he's talking about freedom of speech and he's going to buy Twitter. In case you didn't hear, Elon Musk is going to, the guy who runs Tesla and SpaceX is going to buy Twitter. He claims he's doing it for freedom of speech. He wants to let Donald Trump back on. Trump got banned for using it to promote, the aftermath of the attack on the Capitol and all of that. And actually, he used it during and afterwards. Excuse me. But to not get into that stuff right away, one of the big problems with Twitter historically was, especially back in 2016, I was on Twitter since 2008. And 2016, especially with the election, Twitter was infested with neo-Nazis, with actual neo-Nazis. Not with don't call them Nazis because they're right-wingers, literal Nazis. And these guys were, they would go after Jews in particular. They would also go after women, black people, gays. But they loved going after Jews, especially Jewish people, like reporters and things like this. They would send them horrific graphics from the Holocaust and Photoshop their photo or their family's photos in there and send it to them on Twitter. You would complain. I didn't do it to me. I'm not even Jewish. They did it to me. And you would complain to Twitter and Twitter wouldn't block them and say, and it was outrageous. And they got to the point where they started contacting people at home. One woman, Julia Yoffe, who you guys may have seen, she's on TV on CNN a lot talking about Ukraine. They found out where her underage sister lived and started sending things to her underage sister's home. They called Julia's own home, her apartment, and left messages with Hitler recordings on them. They even called, in Julia's case, called some, I didn't even know this existed, some service that exists for cleaning up your apartment after somebody commits suicide or is killed, because you can imagine the apartment's messy blood. And they set up an appointment for her. So the place called her and said, hi, we just wanted to call up. We got your message about setting up the appointment. And she was like, what are you talking about? This is the kind of psychological stuff they were doing. These guys were actual neo-Nazis, and Twitter was not reining them in. That was the beginning of Twitter finally turning around and starting to do something about the excesses on it. And then you get into the political, then you get into the whole right-wing thing and all of that. I'm not going to get into the Trump thing right now, but I'm just saying there are some very good arguments for why Twitter needed to have some strict policies that needed to be enforced. And the idea that we're just going to let anybody and everybody back on Twitter because free speech reigns, free speech does not reign, not 100% in a private, online especially. We've learned the internet, very scary. The internet, I love the internet because I've been working with it myself since 1995. I've been doing internet politics since then. It's very exciting, and it's also very creepy. There's a very creepy element that is enabled online, and it's worried me to this day. So anyway, Amanda, throwing in another Russia question, you sneaky Amanda Goddard. Russia saying that the UK would be easy to nuke because it would not affect any. Did they say that? She says Russia said the United Kingdom would be easy to nuke, to attack with nuclear weapons because it wouldn't affect any other country. This is but that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's them saying ridiculous things just to freak you out, to freak you guys out. And yes, it would affect another country because if they nuked you, we'd all be nuking them back. Yeah. So they're not going to be doing it because you're part of NATO, and that would be the end of the world. But they're saying this. I don't know who they're trying to impress with this stuff. I guess that to me. Sorry, my dry lips again. That's the thing, not to get into the politics thing again, but that's what fascinates me is who's it for? It's got to be for their own. Okay, it's twofold. One, somebody like Jeremy Corbyn. They're trying to freak out people at home. In the old days, like the 70s, 80s, even 90s, you had a peace movement. 80s and maybe 70s, 80s, and 90s especially, you had a peace movement that was kind of freaked out. And the Russians loved to freak them out about, oh, nuclear war. And then the peace movement would be like, right? So they're probably very upset that there isn't a very strong peace movement meaning, well, let me put it this way. There is a peace movement, and the peace movement is stop Russia because we need peace. The peace movement isn't, oh, stop our governments. The only way we have peace is by stopping our governments from helping Ukraine. That's not it. And Russia's very upset about that. And I think they're trying to do whatever they can to freak you out and to freak me out and everybody else into, oh my God, they just threatened the UK. Maybe we shouldn't give weapons, to Ukraine because they threatened us. I think that's what's going on. So anywho, yeah, but that's the kind of BS they say. The thing is, I would hope it's the kind of things that people back home would just go, give me a break, but because to me, I read that and I almost want to laugh. It just seems so ridiculous. So, oh, what else we got? 6 more minutes, folks. My head's just bothering me again today. Ugh. I don't know why. I did have a great night's sleep, but I did have thank you for the little doggy. I did take a nap today, which helped. So that was good. What else we got? So yes, here all week. I'll be here all week. Tomorrow we're going to do the same thing, 5 p.m. Central Time U.S. That's Chicago time or many other times. 6 p.m. Eastern Time, New York, Washington, D.C. And it should be 2200 UTC, I believe, right? 5 p.m. Central is 17 plus 5, 22. 2200 UTC. So tomorrow we'll be doing that. I will set that up as soon as we're done here so you can find it there. What else? So I'm willing to hang out a few more minutes because I'm tired today. I think, again, I haven't been sleeping well lately, so I did have fun yesterday. It was nice being with the family. Oh, my God, my sister's puppy. Oh, my God. I put a video on TikTok of the hilarious puppy. Oh, my God. This dog was just great. She's got to be 2 pounds. Yorkie poo. Absolutely adorable. And mom's great. The dogs are not getting along terribly. We brought her over to meet mom's dog and my dog, and at first they were all okay. Sasha's good. My dog is on the chair next to me, and she's 12 now. And all of a sudden, when she hit 12, but she's a small dog, so knock on wood, she's still in good shape. But all of a sudden, when she hit 12, she started snoring. And it's not a loud snore, but it's this kind of. So all of a sudden, I'll be like, as I'm talking to you, I was hearing this. Hold on, let me see if I can. I was hearing it. No, I'm not. I was going to put the mic next to it for the TikTok people. She stopped. I think because she heard me and woke up. But she started to make these little snoring noises. So she's snoring next to me underneath my fleece. She likes to be on the chair next to me when I'm working. So she's on the chair next to me, but she's got a fleece on top of her. And I don't want to wake her up since she's enjoying herself. Sorry, I'm yawning at you guys again. I'm sorry. Oh, man. Twitter, the thing is, Twitter is great. I'm not an Elon bro by any means, but Twitter is great. I've been very surprised because what I love is I'm able to do so much in terms of just getting this kind of information for you guys and for myself. I get so much great information from following military experts and reporters on Twitter and reading just all the little bits of info they put out there and being able to pull it together like in one big picture. It's amazing. And you can contact people. I mean, I've had General Hertling, the U.S. general who's been on CNN a lot. He's amazing. Former U.S. general, former commander of the U.S. Army in Europe. Was that Patton's job? I think. I'm trying to remember. Was that Patton's job? But a former commander of the U.S. Army in Europe, big guy, retired now, and he was on CNN saying something, and I got a little bit confused, and I literally tweeted at him. I said, "Hey, General, I saw you spoke. I thought that was really interesting. I didn't understand. Were you saying this or this?" And he said, okay, I was talking about blah, 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 blah. And he explained the whole thing. Twitter's amazing. I mean, I would have no way of reaching out to this guy in a normal world. What am I going to do? Look up his email address and email him? On Twitter, you can message people, and there's at least a decent chance they'll message you back and see it. And I found it with reporters. I found it with people like him. Actually, the other day, oh my God, my big thrill of the weekend was out of nowhere, for some reason, General Stavridis started following me, who's a Greek-American, Stavridis, general who was a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, and he started following me on Twitter, and he follows like 900 people. And I was like, I think it's because I've been doing updates about the war, but also I'm Greek, and he's mentioned Greek a few times, so I think like a lot of us Greeks are very big on being Greek. So we're always excited to find fellow Greeks, Greek Americans, etc. But he started following me, and I was so excited. I was like, General Stavridis is following me. but it's neat. Twitter can be really exciting for broaching that divide, I think, of people, important people in media or politics or wherever. I've got a couple congressmen who follow me and stuff that I've been able to communicate privately on Twitter, which blown my mind, like a member of Congress communicating with me on Twitter. It's kind of neat. I find it, but it enables as we found, the internet can enable bad people to do a lot of really bad things. It's very scary. So, all right, guys, you got another minute, and then I am going sayonara, and I'm going to stop yawning because I'm making you yawn. I'm sorry. I will just say thank you just to start, because I know TikTok, you're always in. Que ποιος του είπα που δεν μιλάω ελληνικά, James? Τι μου λες, αγόρι μου? Ρε μαλάκα? I do speak Greek. My Greek isn't flawless. It used to be fluent. I used to be fluent. Now I don't use my Greek much, so it's kind of rusty. But yes, μιλάω ελληνικά. Αρκετά καλά. Well, ήταν αρκετά καλά. Τώρα δεν ξέρω. I don't use it now. But in any case, yeah, that's about it. Oh, anyway, yeah. So thank you guys as always. Thanks for the gifts. I always appreciate, like I said, the questions and the flowers and everything else on TikTok. I like it because it's also just nice to get that's one of the things I've always said I like about this is with TikTok and YouTube as well. It's nice to get thank you for that, Kanelsi. It's nice because you can get feedback from people. And I find that's one thing on Twitter you don't get. On Twitter, we'd always get the bad people, and you wouldn't get the good people. So you wouldn't get people going, I love your content. I think it's so interesting what you tweet. You'd get the, who are you? Like the nasty people. And one thing, even though we get the nasty trolls, we get a lot of nice people on TikTok. Okay, I mean, YouTube, which is notoriously bad for the comments. Thank you. I saw the duck. Thank you for that. But the YouTube crowd has been really nice because it's this nice crowd where they're having civil conversations, and the YouTube thing, especially with you guys, they get into this whole deep conversation. TikTok, it's been great. You guys are also just very nice. I mean, I find you're always saying nice things during the broadcast. It's a much more civilized way of social media I've been finding, and I've been appreciating that. So just a thing. I know it can get bad too, but I find it's not, maybe also because the topic we're talking about, I'm sure if we start talking about Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the discussion may not be as civilized. But at least we don't have to do that for a while. So we can stick to this. So, oh my God, I'm tired. All right, guys. So, hey, Australia, I'm starting a little late because I'm hanging up. But good to see you guys. I will, so TikTok, I say goodbye first because it takes you're about a minute behind. There's like a delay or something. So, and the rods do the rods do mock. I was going to say the moderators do rock. Thank you, moderators. As I said, I saw whoever that was on TikTok who was spamming, and I was almost going to scroll and see what it was, and then it was like they evaporated. The moderators zapped them. It was fabulous. So I appreciate that, guys. So thank you. Don't tell the TikTok folks how awesome we are. Oh, you're right, because then they'll come over. Oh, I see. The TikTok folks the YouTube folks are getting worried that if I tell you TikTokers how awesome things are on YouTube, you'll go over there instead. That's right. It's our little secret. It's our secret. YouTube. Sorry about that. All right, guys. I'm going to hang up. Good to see you all. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Central Chicago time, 6 p.m. Washington, D.C., New York City time, 2200 UTC, whatever that is in the rest of the world. So... Oh, Sasha. Okay, one sec. Oh, I think Sasha wants to go pee. She's giving me, I got the noise from the other side of the room. All right, guys, that's my calling card or my cue card. Oops. All right, hanging up on TikTok, hanging up with you guys. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.